St. Nicholas is 700 years old this year, and there was always this space in front of it. Particularly when Galway was a walled city, it was a kind of a vital space for a place like a thing like the market.
Initially, when the Normans started to build the town, they didn't want to have anything to do with the Irish. They were totally independent of, we'll say, the Irish. There were a different race of people, so to speak. And they introduced these bylaws, and they suffered because of it themselves, that, we couldn't trade with the native Irish outside the city. But over time, that had to change because they needed the food. So they had to open up something. They had to open the gates and allow these people in to sell their produce. And therefore the markets evolved. And there was 7 markets that we know of in Galway at the time. And of course, St. Nicholas is the one around St. Nicholas is the one that has survived. And it possibly was one of the biggest at that particular time because of its location. A very important location around the big church, as we called it, By the 19th century, the walls of Galway were gone. It wasn't like it was in the past, in the medieval period. The regulations were actually gone as well. It was not saying a free-for-all, but it was very close to it.
Joyful chaos is a description of the market, I think, that suits it perfectly. It suits it to this day, but it always suited it. And it was a necessary phenomenon because it was really the country coming in to feed the city population.
Of all the bits of old Ireland that have been immortalised in song and story, none is more steeped in tradition than this part of County Galway, whence come the ancient market carts into the town of Galway itself. Time has laid a very light hand on the market square. Indeed, it would seem that time has stood almost still, as those who come to market. It's one thing to be thankful for small Murphys, and another to sell them. But the picturesque, unhurried scene, with its beshawled women and strange assortment of wares, lingers in the mind of the visitor. It's so typical of Ireland's countryside.
Well, I come from a farming background. Grew up on a small hill farm, southwest Kerry. Very similar countryside to where I live now, actually. And I was always interested in gardening and growing. We were basically self-sufficient when I was growing up in the 1960s. So you had to produce all your own food because there really was no other way to get it. You work with your soil, you try to improve your soil. Your soil feeds your plant instead of putting in soluble inputs into your ground that actually are taken up by the plant immediately. You feed the soil and the soil feeds the plant. So when I became interested in biodynamic, it broadened out that thinking an awful lot. You start to look at the natural world as all of us as one ecosystem, one particular thing really, and we're all part of it. So everything I do affects the bigger bubble, I suppose. So a lot of people say to me, one small grower doesn't make much difference, but I think the ripples spread out and you do affect other people, no matter how you look at it as being quite small and, insignificant. We've lost our connection to the natural world and to how food is produced to a large degree. And people have lost the connection. They just don't know where stuff comes from anymore. So when they find somebody who is actually growing food and producing it locally, they're quite interested and they will definitely come and buy stuff from you, no matter what you produce. And they have that commitment to eating what they see as unadulterated, healthy food. And they look at where everything comes from.
People, at least the people that I've come across, they enjoy the handmadeness of things. So the mugs I make, the artwork on them are unique. My mom is the artist, and I make the pots. Each pot is individual and unique, So when you see them, you go, oh, this one, you pick them and choose them as you feel that the mug is calling you, basically, or the piece. For me, it's more the reaction on people's faces when they see my product,
When I first started, we did crisps. So there was sweet potato and carrot and parsnip and beetroot and yams and yucca and all sorts. And they were fried and then mixed together, very colorful, very pretty, and I had a couple of different toppings I'd put on them, and they were very popular, actually. Anyways, so we tried soup and bread for, I don't know, one winter or something. And then the woman I was with at the time, her uncle is like the donut king of Dublin. Like that little stall on O'Connell Street, that's him. He was the one who showed me the whole business of donuts and then said, this is what you should do if you want to make a few bob. And and it worked great. Yeah, and at the time I was thinking, we'll change next year. Since we seem to be changing every year or two just to keep the customers guessing. But at some stage it became apparent that I couldn't change because it has become like a public service donut store. People would have been really objected. There'd have been some broken-hearted children. You can imagine if I had to stop, it'd be. But that is the way, and iconic to the point where people call me Donut Man and Donuts, and my friends call me Donuts. Hey, how's it going?
Can I get 3 please?
3, come right up, look. Do you fancy a bit of cinnamon or some cocoa? Oh yeah.
No, sugar's very high. Thanks.
That's just what the dentist says. Doing the market for me is really, really great because I feel like I have to be on and be accommodating to my customers when they come to my stall. And that means I have to pull myself out of myself sometimes. Sometimes, you go in and you just feel great and you're just bubbling and ready to get in. And some days that takes a little bit more work, and it's really good, actually, because, basically you have to get your head out of your arse and tuck in with people. It's great for me. And I don't have a big social life outside of the market except for maybe at my local. So for me, the market's also a big contact with people thing. But it's good, you really have to bring yourself out of yourself because you got to bring it on.
I know, I told you I'd be back. Remember in the morning?
You did? Well, people still come to the market. For instance, if some woman comes to the market and you're talking to her and she tells you her husband is not well, you'll talk to her. And the week after, you'll ask her, how's your husband? How is he doing? And that to a person, you don't get that in Aldi's, Lidl's or Dunn's. You're close, do you know what I mean? You're close. That's how the market is. It's personal with customers. The customer comes to you every week. They bring their kids every week. You give them a banana. Some of the kids wait for their banana. So they do. So that's really why a lot of people does come to the market because of the closeness to the customer.
A street market is just as much a social occasion as a bring and buy sale for out-of-town country folk. The donkey work can be tough at times, but there's colour in a street-side flower stall, another intimate corner of a market that sprawls in the shadow of the newly built Galway Cathedral.
The Saturday market is one of the great traditions of Galway, but it's a kind of indicator at the same time of how things have evolved and changed in this country. In the latter half of the last century, things began to change. We were part of Europe. We were no longer just exclusively Irish, we were now European. And we began to travel. The Irish people began to travel, and they came back with different kinds of ideas. And as they did, people began to, of course, supply to those tastes.
I remember when the African influence was introduced, the Asian influence was introduced, you could smell the spices and the wonderful foods, and it was amazing that we were introduced to other cultures from other parts of the world in the Galway market.
Oh, stop. Years ago when I first worked in the market and I worked for the olive stall, you'd have people coming up and asking what they were. There'd be a lady come up to see the barrel of green olives and say, "Are those gooseberries?" And 6 months later she'd be going, "No, not the Calamod, I want the Moroccans." The same lady, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it has enriched people's lives and obviously enriched their eating.
I'm selling cheese on the Galway Market for the last, I think, 43 years or something like that. So it's been a while since I started here. The nice thing about our idea was that the only cheese that was available in this country was red or white cheddar. We, with our cheese, were, of course, a very a strange product. They never saw it here, and they were asking, "What sort of cakes are you selling?" So, well, it was a good thing to start and give people samples of a completely different cheese than they were used to. People of Galway, they've always been very open to change, to different ideas, which was, we thought it was great.
When a train come along, if you see my family, and they're from Galway City, gonna meet you at the station. When a train come along, child, when a train come along, child.
Galway, from the beginning when I came, I already see many colorful people like never before. You can see the quality, the difference, the originality. But this I noticed from the beginning, actually. And it's increased probably with this market because more people start to sell stuff original and different, no? A lot of diversity. It's important for the future generation, no? To see that there is a different type of expression. Actually, the product that you find there are original. It's full of artists there. Incredible. It's just the ambient is very important, no? So what we have in Galway is really, really unique.
I think you have to nourish this market all the time that it is still creating an interest, that you get good producers, different produce, diversity.
What I think the market to survive has to keep changing, renewing itself. It constantly has to, if you like, be reborn. And that's why I think there's always need for new traders to come in. There are plenty of new talents out there who have great ideas for the market.